So thank you so much. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And yeah, let's dive in. So where we're going to be picking up today is, as Peppa was saying, on page 30. Now we're going to be picking up page 30, very bottom paragraph. We are like men who have lost their legs. But before we dive into that, just because we have some people that are new to this meeting, maybe new to recovery, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Last week, we were earlier in the page, and we were talking about the step one experience. And that step one experience was that we learned that we needed to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. And for those that might not be familiar with the first step, or who might be familiar with the first step, but might not have had that experience, that first step experience, I just want to touch upon it briefly. To concede to my innermost self is to surrender to the most deepest part of who I am, that I have the allergy of the body. And what that means is that I can concede to my innermost self, that I can surrender, that once I start to drink, man, I don't know what's going to happen. But more often than not, I lose control. More often than not, I drink into consequences. I drink beyond lines in the sand. What I'm trying to concede is that I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I can never drink again. Now that is the first concession that I need to make for my first step. This is the second concession, and it is just as important as the first, and it is often missed. You see, what I need to concede is that I have the obsession of the mind, and I need to see that in the depth of who I am, that I have a thought that happens when I'm sober that takes me back again and again and again to that first drink, despite how deep I was able to concede that I can't drink again. And so what I'm conceding in step one is that I can never, ever drink again, but I'm going to drink again. That I have to stay sober, that I need to stay sober, but on my own power, I can't stay sober. And that is the step one experience, when I can experientially say, oh no, because I mean, that's not good news. Like, oh no, that's me. That's what we're after. So as we dive in and say at the bottom of 30, we are like men who have lost their legs, they never grow new ones. That's the context of what we're talking about. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, when I'm at and only at an in-person meeting and somebody is reading this part of the book, I'll pretend I've gotten a little benumb and I'll be sitting there like, what? What? We've lost our legs? They don't regrow? What? Now, for those of you who don't get why I am full of shenanigans today, it's because I'm in a wheelchair. And that joke only lands when I'm in person and like, what? They don't regrow? What? Just a little troublemaker over here. That's who I am. I'm the problem. It's me. All right. So, but what does that mean? It says that it's the idea that if I have the allergy, I will always have the allergy. If I have the allergy, there will never be a time when I am ever safely able to drink again. And if I have the obsession of the mind, I will always have the obsession of the mind, which is to say, and I know you're like, always, the exception is when I have that spiritual awakening is the result of the 12 steps, that I deepen and that I grow, that I'm seeking. And so what that means is that just as much as there will never be a time when I can ever safely drink again, there will never be a time when I cannot be fully engaged with the daily actions of the 12 steps. That's what I'm trying to see. And that's not what I'm trying to bother people at in-person meetings when I'm like, what? What do you mean it doesn't grow back? What? I'm the problem. Okay. It goes on to say, neither does there appear to be any kind of treatment which will make alcoholics of our kind much like other men. So we don't have a way to take an alcoholic and make them not an alcoholic. And here's what I can do. I can hold my experience up to the mirror that is the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And I can ask myself, have I tried every imaginable remedy, because it says we have tried every imaginable remedy. Now, I'll be honest with you guys. I did not try everything, but everything that I tried failed. All the attempts that I did, and I tried, and I gave it a good go to control my drinking, they didn't work. And all my attempts, all the things that I tried to stay sober, they didn't work. So I can hold my experience up to the light. Is that my experience? That what I tried has not worked? As much as I love you guys, I have a feeling the answer is, it hasn't worked, because otherwise you'd have better things to do on a Wednesday. I'm so glad you're hanging out with me, but let's be real. If you had another choice, you'd be out there doing that. So, welcome. We're truly hopeless. It's a good time over here. All right. I know I'm a little like the tone needs to be like really macabre, but I'm like roistering around over here like, woo, yeah, hopeless. It's not the best tone. All right. So it goes on to say, in some instances, let's hold our experience up. In some instances, there's been brief recovery followed always. And I want to emphasize always, because what that is saying is that relapse is inevitable unless followed always by a still worse relapse. Has that been my experience up to date? That there have been periods of recovery. Maybe I went to a detox, a hospital, a psych ward, a treatment, rehab, a sober living, and maybe I just tried going to the gym or tried, getting in or out of a relationship, depending on which ways the winds of codependency were blowing. Not you guys. I know you guys can't relate to that. But this little codependent over here, I'm being blown around, buffeted by the winds of codependency. Did I have some periods of sobriety? Did it look like I was having recovery? Because I would maybe even go to meetings, check out some AA, maybe even make a start at some of the steps, maybe even write a fourth step. But it was always followed by a relapse that got worse and worse and worse. Is that my experience? Because if that is, that's what we're talking about. And that is those of us who are in desperate need of a spiritual experience. Because nothing less than a spiritual experience, nothing less than a spiritual awakening, and I will drink again. And that is the solution that we offer. And I know we're like really hoping that there's another way. And the book says, it goes on to say, physicians who are familiar with alcoholism agree that there is no such thing as making a normal drinker out of an alcoholic. Science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. So there's that hope that maybe someday, somehow, like we will find, and I always joke, like we'll find a pill that'll cure our alcoholism. And I don't know about you. 2, Rob? I'm not taking 2. I'm taking 6. Yeah, I'm taking 6. Because if one's good, 6 is better. Yeah, right? And so, like, science may one day accomplish this, but it hasn't done so yet. And I just want to point something out. We are all, like, meeting on devices, many of whom are meeting on our phones, little devices that we could put in our pockets that send signals through the air and often into space that allow us to sit here, pew, 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 all over, that allow us to sit here from around the world, different time zones, in living picture together. But we still don't have a cure for alcoholism that doesn't involve a spiritual awakening. Whoop, whoop, Oh no. And similarly, like later on in the book, it's like maybe one day we shall see man on the moon. That's me looking at the moon, I guess. And we've had rovers on Mars so long that they were up there and they died. And then I felt sorry for them because I do that. You know what I mean? So that's how far science has progressed. And yet we still do not have an answer other than a spiritual awakening. And that's what our answer is. So again, I'm going to point out the book is going to meet us where we're at. And so if you're here today and you're like, ew, gross, who let her chair this meeting? I do think it was a group decision, but Carolina had a big influence on that. So you can blame her. But if you're like, oh, I don't like that. I don't think this applies to me. Well, the book is going to meet us where we're at. And I believe if the book meets us where we're at, that is where God meets us too. Higher power, creator, spirit of the universe. It says, despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe that they are in that class. So 2 things. 1, what does it mean to be a real alcoholic? We may hear that in the rooms. I'm so-and-so, I'm a real alcoholic. I'm a real alcoholic. What does that mean? And the reason I want to be really clear about what it means to be a real alcoholic is because that was me. I was a real alcoholic, but I was convinced I was not like you. I would do this thing. I would show up to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, convinced that I stumbled into this fellowship, after a series of unfortunate oopsie-doopsies and whoopsie-daisies, which is the technical term, No, and I showed up. Listen, I had buckets, and these are the units in which these things are measured. Buckets of andas. I'm an alcoholic anda, anda this, anda that, anda, and I also showed up under the other arm, a bucket of yeah buts. Yeah, but I'm young. Yeah, but he's worse than me. Yeah, but, my andas and my yeah buts, it's like a KFC, bucket chicken dinner, deal, something like that. That's how I showed up. And I would do this thing. And I know that nobody here at ODAAT would ever do this thing. And it's called judging the speaker. You guys would never. But I was sitting there, and back in the day, because it was only in person, and I would sit at the spiritual back row, trying to hide behind a pillar so nobody would talk to me, because that's how spiritual I was. Spiritual back row in the pillar, and I would hear some jerk like me natter on. Oh gosh, I'm not as bad as her. Do you know what I mean? And then some lovely fellow like Rob would be chit-chatting, and I'd be like, wow, I'm way worse than that guy, And I was looking for all the ways I wasn't like you. I was looking for all the ways I didn't fit. I was looking for all the differences, and I would compare the consequences of my alcoholism. See, y'all would be sharing about your DUIs. Well, I'm not an alcoholic. I've never had a DUI. I've never had a driver's license. Now, the real ones know you don't need a driver's license for a DUI. There are some people here who've got a DUI before they got their learners, but I didn't have a driver's license. And then I would hear y'all talking about your divorces, and I had never been divorced. Never been married, because that requires paperwork and going to a courthouse or something, and I wasn't functional for that. Common law, because all you have to do is just don't leave each other, So never had a divorce, And I was comparing these things that I had never had. So what does it mean to be a real alcoholic? Oh, and I should also say, people would talk about going to jail, and I'll just throw it out. Wasn't caught, but I'll throw out. I wasn't that clever of a criminal either. I was barely anything. Anywho, but what does it mean to be a real alcoholic? So I lay all of that aside. Here's what it means. When I start to drink, can I control the amount that I take every single time? And if the answer is no, then I've got the allergy of the body. And when I want to stay sober, does my desire to stay sober have a permanent effect? So if I've ever said I don't want to drink again, doesn't matter if I said it at 3 a.m., praying to the porcelain gods at the spiritual prayer position where we're puking out our guts, had no problem praying on my knees then. But if I've ever said I don't want to drink again, and I've drank again, then that means I have the obsession of the mind. And if I have the allergy and I have the obsession, what that means is I'm a real alcoholic. Doesn't matter how old I am, doesn't matter where I come from, doesn't matter my family, doesn't matter my rap sheet, doesn't matter my driving record. That might matter for Brian. He's driving. But none of that matters. What matters is what happens when I drink and what happens when I try to stay sober. And so the book is going to meet us there in that I'm not like you. I'm different. I'm not a real alcoholic. And it goes on to say, by every form of self-deception and experimentation, they will try to prove themselves exceptions to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. Now that self-deception and experimentation, those are two words that are synonyms. Sometimes I like to say cinnamons. It's pumpkin spice season. But synonyms for the obsession of the mind. Words that mean the same thing as the obsession of the mind. And what it's saying is that many of us are going to hear my description and think, no, I'm not like that Paige. I'm not like you. I'm not like what the book is saying. I'm different. And what we will do is we will try to prove that we aren't like other alcoholics. We'll try to prove ourselves exceptions to the rule. And here is what exceptions to the rule would be. The exception to the rule is that I have examples from my own life of the allergy, but no, I'll be able to drink normally in the future. That would be the exception. How's that worked? Not great if we're hanging out with me. The other exception to the rule is, yes, I've had some experiences where I said I didn't want to drink again, only to find myself drinking again, but I don't need to work all 12 steps as a way of life like my life depends on it. I'm just going to go to some meetings. I'm just going to coast. I'm just going to, you know what I mean? And I'll throw it out there. If you're hanging out with me, that hasn't worked well either. I am the last resort of the truly desperate. Title of some sex inventory I've written too. That was too far. That was too far. I'll reel it in already. So, but it goes on to say, they're try to prove themselves exception to the rule, therefore non-alcoholic. If anyone who is showing the inability to control his drinking, so we're talking about that allergy, that lack of control is the allergy, and the allergy happens once I start to drink. So if anyone who is showing the inability to control his drinking can do the right about face, like do a 180, turn around and drink like a gentleman, or a lady, or a distinguished human being, I'm doing pinkies up like I used to behind the dumpster, drink like a gentleman, our hats are off to him. If somebody here is like showing signs of alcoholism and you're like, you know what, I'm either gonna do it on my own or I'm gonna be able to drink normally, our response is our hats are off to you. You do it. You do it. And here's why. One is this whole thing, it's not like, this is not it's not a cult. We're not going to try to convince you to do it. Nobody's going to make you. Although, another thing, inappropriate thing that I will do at in-person meetings, because it's only fun there, is I'll make a joke that there's no AA police. And I'm like, no, that's what happened. I didn't want to write inventory and they took my legs, which is not appropriate. I've been gently suggested that I shouldn't be doing that, but I do it anyways. But it's that idea that you get to have your own experience. Alcoholics Anonymous is experiential. And here's the thing, if you don't think you're an alcoholic, I'm not going to convince you you're an alcoholic. My job is to tell you what the symptoms are, to make that clear, because it is that clear in this book. But if you're like, nah, that doesn't apply to me, any begging, pleading, manipulating, coercing, force, kicking, I don't do kicking, that's lower legs, didn't work that well. I can't do any of that to convince you. What will happen is if you do it on your own, one of two things. One, hey, maybe you're not. Great, amazing, you don't have to do this. Great, wonderful. But if you find that doing it your way doesn't work, what that does is it begins to strip away all the delusion, all the denial, all the andas, all the yeah buts, and I begin to see clearly who and what I am. And I begin to be drawn into a place of hopelessness. And that hopelessness happens when I come to the end of myself, when I don't got any more me, any more plans, any more designs, and that's when I'm willing to try something new, try a new way. So it goes on to say, heaven knows we have tried hard and long enough to drink like other people. Has that been our experience? Have I tried hard enough and long enough to control and enjoy my drinking? Have I tried hard and long enough to avoid the inevitable consequences of drinking? Have I tried hard and long enough to drink like a lady or a gentleman or a distinguished human being? Have I tried? And has it not worked? And again, we can go and try, or we can hold our experience, our ample experience, up to the light, up to the mirror that is this book. So another way that we can do this is, here are some of the methods we tried. And this is the longest sentence in the big book. So just going to throw that out there. If you wanted a fun fact, longest sentence in the big book. So here are some of the methods we tried. So we can ask ourselves, have we tried these things? And I'm going to point something out, that as we go through some of these methods that we try, we start with attempts to control the physical allergy. We start with attempts to control our drinking. But there's a progression that happens. And you'll see by the end of this technically sentence that at the end, what we're going to attempt is ways to stay sober, because we see the attempt to control is impossible. So, have we tried these methods? Drinking beer only. Yeah, you got it. Have we tried just beer? This is a quote from Dr. Bob, I believe, where he was like, after all, nobody got drunk on beer because he tried the beer experiment. He just got drunk and bloated. Have I tried that? I'm just going to switch to beer. Have I tried this? Limiting the number of drinks. I'm just going to have 3 drinks, or I'm only going to stick to 12, just like a response, or I'm only going to drink tonight. Like, have I tried that? It goes on to say, never drinking alone. Okay, if I'm going to drink with other people, I won't get hammered. I won't make a jerk out of myself. Yikes. I preferred to drink alone because some stuff was afoot when I was drinking. Have we tried never drinking in the morning? Have we tried drinking only at home? So I saw that, like, this thing is getting bad, so I'm going to set a rule. I'm not going to drink before 5 p.m. or I'm not going to drink before noon, or I'm not going to, and did that time start getting a little earlier, by the way? But also, did I create these rules and then I couldn't live up to them? Did I try never drinking only at home because I saw that I was causing problems and consequences when I drank when other people, the police, were getting called, and that's not social. So did I try that, and did that not work? Never having it in the house. Did I try that? Never drinking during business hours. So I'm not going to drink while I'm working because I don't multitask well. If I'm drinking, I'm drinking. I'm not working. Right? It goes on to say, drinking only at parties. Did I try that? Switching from scotch to brandy. So did I try switching what my drinks were? Going from gin to rum, or rum to tequila? Probably not. Switching to beer and wine. Like, did I switch to softer alcohols or lower alcohol content? Or did I throw in some non-conference approved drugs? Did I do any of that? Let me tell you, if you smoke enough crack, it'll level you off, but then you need to drink because you're a little too wired for sound. Allegedly, I mean, maybe me. But like, did I try some of those outside things? It goes on to say, drinking only natural wines, because they've got the antioxidants. How could that hurt me? It's good for my health. Doesn't the doctor say a glass of wine a day? Drinking it out of one of the buckets that I came with my andas and my yabbas, you know what I mean? Right? Or trying to, do things that are less harmful or more natural. It doesn't work. Now, it then goes on to say, agreeing to resign if ever drunk on the job. So I swear that I'm never going to drink on the job, but maybe I've been put on a I think they're called a PIP, a performance improvement plan. Like, maybe work has been seeing that I've been drinking, and they're saying, hey, if you show up, you got to go to treatment. You show up drunk, you got to go to treatment or you're fired. Have I ever said, okay, I'm not going to drink at work? Have I ever done that, right? It goes on to say, now I love this, taking a trip, not taking a trip. Because wherever I go, there I am, right? And it doesn't matter if I go to Ibiza or Ashtabula. Does not matter where I go, there I am, right? And so you might think, all right, well, I'm not going to go to the girls' night in Ibiza, or I'm not going to go to the boys' night in Cabo. I'm not going to go on that trip. Or I'm gonna go to Ashtabula, Ohio, because nothing ever happens there. You can ask Brian's dad all about it. Nothing happens there. It'll be calm. It'll be relaxing. I won't drink. Ever do the good old geographic? I moved down to Lethbridge. Turns out it's just windy and I'm just as alcoholic. Wild, you know? Did I ever try that? It talks about, now this, swearing off forever with and without solemn oath. So like putting my hand on my heart, putting my hand in, like in court back in the day, putting your hand on the Bible, swearing I'm never going to do it again. Have I sworn off and did that not work? Now we're transitioning to where we know that we cannot drink, but we need to stay sober and we can't. Did we try taking more physical exercise? Some of y'all know I have that pickle design that I made that says abs did not lead to abstinence. You know, there was a time in my life, not recently, there was a time in my life like 20 years ago when, let me tell you, I had abs. Did not lead to abstinence. I was ripped. But I kept getting ripped, you know? It didn't work. So did I try the gym? Did I do yoga? Did I do that? And it says, reading inspirational books. Was I poring over the self-help aisle at Chapters or whatever the local bookstore is? Did I, or nowadays, was I doing inspirational TikToks? Was I scrolling on those? Or, the ones that are like, you set a boundary. And like, that's right, I'm going to set a boundary. And then I scrolled and I'm like, off on something else. Did I try those? Did they not work? It says going to health farms and sanitariums. Did I go to rehabs? Did I go to treatment centers? Did I go to retreats? Did I go to places, psych wards? It says accepting voluntary commitment to asylums. That would be maybe psych wards, emergency rooms, detoxes. Did I go to sober living? If I'm wondering, have I ever been in an institution? An institution is where the doors lock from the inside out, and where you have to make your bed. That's not optional. So I'm just going to throw that out there. If you're not sure if I've ever been in an asylum, that's a modern equivalent is anywhere I had to make my bed and I couldn't leave. And it says we could increase the list ad infinitum, which is to say we could continue to add to this list of all the times and all the places and all the ways that we have tried to control our drinking and it didn't work, and all the times and ways and places that we have tried to stay sober and it didn't work. We could add to it and add to it and add to it and add to it. And it goes on to say, now, here's the thing. When I talk about how Alcoholics Anonymous is experiential, not intellectual, what we're going to see is if you're here today and you're like, I don't know if I'm an alcoholic. Paige, you're telling me all this stuff. I'm not sure. The easiest thing I can do is I can hold my experience up to the light of these symptoms. And I can see, yes, that is me. But if I am not convinced, I can have an experience with these symptoms. So this is going to be the first experience or the first experiment that we can have if you're not sure that you're an alcoholic. It says we do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic. And I always like to say, it says we don't like to. It doesn't say we're not good at it. But we don't like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. And by the way, I like to make that joke, but why do I need to diagnose myself with alcoholism? Why doesn't it matter what my doctor thinks, my family thinks, my sponsor thinks, my judge, my parole officer, my boss who's being a nag? Why does it matter what they think? The reason it matters is I'm the one that needs to be convinced. I need to be convinced I have the allergy and what that means. And I need to be convinced I have the obsession and what that means. So it says, we do not like to pronounce any individual as alcoholic, but you can quickly diagnose yourself. So you can find out for yourself. And here it is. Step over to the nearest bar room. It might be in Ashtabula. It might not be. You step over to the nearest bar room and try some controlled drinking. Try to drink and stop abruptly. Now, Rob's going to put in the chat, I'm sure if he hasn't already, the Marty Mann test. Yeah, he's going to put in the Marty Mann test. And she's our homegirl. She's a big reason why alcoholism became classified as a disease. And here's the test. And here's what it's saying to do. Go to the bar or wherever you drink and have 3 drinks. 3 drinks. And then when it says stop abruptly, we stop for a 24-hour period. That's the test. That's the test. Go and have 3 drinks and stop for 24 hours. And then it says try it more than once. And I want to be very clear that 24-hour thing, because if you kind of do alcoholic math the way that I do, I stopped abruptly when I went to the bathroom and I broke the seal. That was my abrupt stop. And then I'll start doing some math about I did start drinking a little earlier than I would normally. Maybe I should, wrap up the drinking a little bit, you know what I mean? Or drink a little bit later. And I'm just doing some math so I can keep going on this thing, right? But what we're trying to see is, do I have the allergy? And it says, it will not take long for you to decide if you are honest with yourself about it. Because if I hold this information up to that light of the experience, man, we're going to know quite clearly that we've got the allergy. We're going to figure that out very quickly, very clearly. And it says it may be worth a bad case of jitters if you get a full knowledge of your condition. And sometimes we hear this and it's like, wait a minute, is the big book telling me to drink? And I just want to point something out. Yeah, technically, if you're not convinced. But what I want to point out is when I work with sponsees, we go through the book line by line, by and large. We go through the book line by line. And I have never had a sponsee that got to this part of the book and was like, oh yeah, I'm going to go and try some controlled drinking. Every single person that I have worked with has been like, oh God, I don't need to do that. I know immediately what would happen. And I feel like that's most of us in the meeting today. That we're like, absolutely, I don't need to do that. I know beyond a shadow of a doubt what would happen. I wouldn't be able to control it. But not all of them stayed sober. And that, again, points to the obsession of the mind and the power of the obsession of the mind. Because in the here and now, in this moment, I can see beyond a shadow of a doubt that I cannot ever drink again. Because I can see that this experiment will not work. But if I don't have a spiritual awakening, I'm going to have a thought. And that thought is going to be like, I think I can have 3 drinks tonight. I'll stop at 3 and I'll believe the lie. So that paragraph, I want to be very clear, that paragraph is an experiment where we are testing to see, do I have the allergy of the body? And again, I might show up as this Benumb human being. And what we're trying to do is smash through the delusion that I have to see the truth about who and what I am. It goes on to say, though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, and I will throw out that only an alcoholic's going to make a career out of it. You know what I mean? I was more than a 9 to 5. Oh, I was burning that midnight oil. I like to joke. I was climbing that corporate ladder, by which I mean quickly descending to the lowest depths of my existence. Woo! But I really took that seriously. Though there is no way of proving it, we believe that early in our drinking careers, most of us could have stopped drinking. But the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop drinking while there is yet time. Now, one of the things is when we were in There Is a Solution, we spoke about 3 types of drinkers. We spoke about the moderate drinker. The moderate drinker, they get no effect from alcohol, and if they need to stay sober, they stay sober. So they've got no allergy, they've got no obsession. Then we spoke about a hard drinker. Now, a hard drinker is somebody, if they had a sufficiently strong reason, they could stop or they could moderate. And I will point out, if you're hanging out with me, I promise that you have had sufficiently strong reasons. I am the last resort of the truly desperate. You know, you're not hanging out with me because it's a fun Wednesday activity, but I'm so glad you're here and I love you. But that idea that what it means to have alcoholism is that I do not have control once I start, and I do not have choice, which is to say I will drink again. And so it's saying that for many of us, there were periods in our life where we could have stopped, where maybe we were a moderate drinker, maybe even we were a hard drinker. But if we are here today and reading this book, the chances are that we have alcoholism and we don't have the ability to stop on our own power. And we point that out, and it's important to point that out because as alcoholics, we tend to do this thing. You can let me know if you've already done it as I've been chatting here today. Will hear me talk about the physical allergy, and you'll immediately go into your little mental Rolodex of drinking experiences and think, but wait, Paige, there was this time back in 84. Back in 2002, back in 2016, back in 2020, I had 3 drinks and my pants were dry and I had both my shoes. You know, you're like, wait a minute. And I had this fun scene where like we were talking about the moderate drinker, the hard drinker, the real alcoholic. And we diagnosed her as, at 9 years old, she was a moderate drinker. By the time she hit about like 14, 15, she was a heavy drinker. But by the time she was 18, she was a real deal, you know. So that idea that I will hold on to these exceptions. Now, I want to point out, if you were to ask a non-alcoholic, hey, could you tell me a time where you went out and you had 3 drinks and you didn't piss your pants? They're going to say every time. And if you ask, God bless them, if you ask them to tell you a good old drinking story, oh, bless their heart, those sweet summer childs. You know what I mean? Like they're out there. And then I got a little tipsy, you know. Woo, I said something silly at the work party. No, like I'm pissing my pants, I'm breaking things. Like, yeah, that's who I am. Like a lady, pinkies up. And so I'm remembering the exception to the rule. And often what happens with alcoholism, with the allergy of the body, it's a little like I'm playing a game of Russian roulette. And what I've got is I've got a gun, and the gun that holds the bullets. The bullets are the allergy of the body. Now, once I start to drink, now I'll be honest, my experience was like bang from the get-go. Like I did not have a period of moderate drinking. It was not good from the start. But what happens is, for a lot of us, we play this game and it's click, 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 and I get a bang and it kind of scares me. But I mean, alcohol works, so we keep drinking. Click, click, bang. And then we keep drinking. Click, click, bang. And you see, the more that I drink, it's like a nefarious force puts more bullets in the chamber. And the longer that we're drinking, the more and more we experience the allergy of the body. By the time we're hanging out here with somebody like me, by the time every time I take a drink, off I go. Do you know what I'm saying? Now, I can hold my experience up to that light with the obsession of the mind. You see, there might have been times early in our drinking careers where like, no, I want to go to school, or I'm studying for an exam, or while I do this job, or whatever it is, I'm going to stay sober. Maybe we're pregnant, we're able to stay sober for the full 9 months, but many of us aren't. Do you know what I'm saying? So maybe early in our drinking careers, we're able to stay sober for a period of time. And we're like, but wait a minute, I was able to stay sober for a year back in 04, back in 72, back in 68, back in 89. Back then I was able to do it. And so what we're saying is that when it says, but the difficulty is that few alcoholics have enough desire to stop while there is yet time, what we're saying is our lived experience is that today I can't control the amount that I drink, and today I can't stay sober on my own power. And we can see, like, oftentimes as we go through the cycle, we see that as we go through this cycle, our periods of sobriety get closer and closer and closer together. Oftentimes, when we maybe are staying sober for a year or more, and then we're sober for 9 months, and then 9 months, and then 6 months, and then 3 months, and then 2 months, and then it's a struggle to get 30 days. And then all of a sudden, before I know it, I can't stay sober a week. And before I know it, I can't string together 3 days. What is my current lived experience? Is it my current experience that I cannot control the amount that I drink once I start? And is my current lived experience that once I start, I cannot stop, and once I stop, I cannot stay stopped no matter how much I need to? It goes on to say, we have heard of a few instances where people who showed definite signs of alcoholism were able to stop for a long period because of an overpowering desire to do so. Here is one. Now, one of the things that we're going to do, I'm going to see if I'm going to pull up 2 things. Hold on. I pulled up one already, but we get what we get. All right. So here's what I want to share with us. Boom, 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 ta-da! The cycle. And so we dove into this in great detail in the doctor's opinion. And as we go through the chapter More About Alcoholism, what we're going to do is we're going to see some examples that are really focusing on this, really focusing on the mental obsession. That's what the focus is. And so what we're going to do is we're going to see these people, some of them real, some of them fictional. We're going to see them go through this cycle of alcoholism. And what it looks like is it'll often start with a swearing off, a firm resolution that I am never going to drink again. And this is important because I want to hold up my experiences to the light of this cycle, because this is alcoholism. This is what makes this thing hopeless. So have I ever sworn off? And then we want to have a look at the spiritual malady. Now, the spiritual malady is not limited to alcoholics. Non-alcoholics have the spiritual malady, but I want to be really clear. This is what we treat in Alcoholics Anonymous. This is what the spiritual awakening treats. But this is also what is fueling the obsession of the mind. And so we want to have a look at what was the thought that I had. This time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I just got to get it out of my system. The thought that I have when I am sober that takes me back again and again to the first drink. And we're going to see these symptoms, and we're going to see them, maybe not today, because I'm just aware that I'm not doing phenomenal for time. But we're going to see, probably next week, our guy, the man of 30, carpet slipper guy, and we're going to see what is the obsession of the mind. And that's what we want to see, just how inevitable that first drink is, and how powerful that thought is. And then we have that first drink, and what does it give us? It gives us that sense, and it is only a sense, but that sense of ease and comfort. You know, the thing about that is that treats the spiritual malady. That puts a balm on the ache that is the restless, irritable discontent, the way in which I feel sober. So it makes sense that over time my mind would tell me a lie, any lie it could, to get me to take that first drink so that I could get relief. But you see, I take that drink, and what sets off? What sets off is the physical allergy. That phenomenon of craving. I take that drink, it needs another, which needs another, which needs another. And the more I drink, the more I need to drink. And off I go on a spree. And that spree is any length of time that I'm drinking. It stays weeks, months, years, etc. It could even be a single afternoon. But at some point, that spree comes to an end. I black out, pass out, get locked up, end up in the hospital, run out of booze, and I come to and I emerge remorseful, fueled with that guilt and shame and remorse and self-hatred, and that leads me to say I will never drink again. And the hallmark of what is alcoholism is this moment, I will never drink again, but it has no effect. And I'm thrust back into the spiritual malady. I'm thrust into me, and I got nothing that I can put between me. And it's more painful than it was before because I got all this guilt and shame. And I get a thought. That thought is the obsession of the mind. I know what will fix this, and I take that first drink. And that drink takes me, and off I go, and I go around this cycle again and again and again. And that's what we're really going to see. And if I just take this and I look at it just like this cycle, that is step one. When I can see that that is my life and my life is in this, what I will see is that I will drink again. I need to stay sober. I want to stay sober. I have to stay sober, but I will drink again. And we're not going to talk about carpet slipper guy, our man of 30. So what I will do is I will wrap up with what is our solution? The solution that we have in Alcoholics Anonymous is the spiritual awakening. That's our answer. That's our solution because it treats the spiritual malady. And nothing else has worked. The spiritual awakening. And if I could believe that a spiritual awakening could be possible, that's my second step. And how do I get off the cycle? How do I get out of the hopelessness in step 1 to the hope that's available in step 12? Well, it is the 12 steps. That is the course of action that takes me from my problem, the hopelessness of alcoholism, the inevitability of the relapse, to the spiritual awakening. That's the 12 steps. And when I make a decision that I'm going to do that, I'm going to work these 12 steps out of the book, Alcoholics Anonymous, as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. That's when I've made my third step decision. So, no man of 30 today, but stay tuned stay tuned for next week when we'll discuss it. So, over to you, Peppa. Thank you.